I thought I inherited an old house full of dust and forgotten things, sagging under the weight of a lifetime of junk. But it turns out I was left with something else entirely. A war that's been going on for centuries. My Uncle Jonas was a recluse who survived in a closed-off world of nostalgia, living off of his military benefits. Since I was a kid, I thought he was pretty interesting, but nobody else in my family could stand him, especially my mom, his baby sister. She blamed Vietnam, said it wrecked him, stole the big goofy brother she once loved, and replaced him with an imposter, dredged from the putrid mud of a battlefield he should have never have been on. When the war ended, Uncle Jonas moved in with my grandma in her huge farmhouse on Vickerman Hill in Mohawk, New York, and he never left. After she died in the late 90s, when I was 9, he and my mother fought bitterly over what to do with their inheritance. She wanted to sell the house, but he refused because he wanted to live in it. Being the oldest, he had just as much claim to it as she did, and he dug his heels in. She tried to convince him that he could get a new house with the money and get out of Herkimer County, but he didn't care about leaving. So she gave in and focused on us, her own family. But as the years went on, my mom resented him for turning her childhood home into a hoarder's labyrinth of junk he called clothes, toys, comic books, and baseball cards. But I loved it because it felt like every time we went there, he had more weird stuff for me. He let me comb through his treasures and always gifted me things I showed interest in. I even still have the original Planet of the Apes figure he gave me when I was a kid, which is actually worth a lot of money now. Uncle Jonas was the first person I knew who used eBay, selling stuff he gathered from garage sales and flea markets across upstate New York. When I was 12, they had another blowout fight, and that was the last time I saw my Uncle Jonas. We stayed in touch, though, through email and social networks, though until life got in the way and we drifted apart. Ever since I was little, Jonas whispered legends and shared hushed warnings about the world with me, the supernatural and strange things he claimed to have seen. We used to listen to Coast AM together and talk about chariots of the gods and aliens and all that fun stuff. I dismissed them as the ramblings of an aging eccentric whose brain got a little too jumbled and numb, who watched too many Twilight Zone reruns and maybe smoked a few too many joints. But I loved it. And when he died unexpectedly, I never imagined that sorting through my grandmother's decrepit farmhouse would thrust me into a nightmare beyond comprehension. His burial arrangements were paid for, and his will requested no funeral. Shockingly, he left everything to me. That meant I now shared ownership of the house with my mom. She wanted nothing to do with it. She was done. It's beyond repair. Tear it down and give his junk to the Salvation Army in Ilion, she said. But I couldn't. I figured there had to be something valuable hidden in this mess. Stuff worth keeping or flipping on eBay myself. So I took on the task alone and actually was pretty excited about it. Because I had just been laid off, thanks to a lot of bad decisions by our government disguised as helping the working class to pay for massive tax cuts for the rich. My company was one of many that lost several millions of dollars in funding thanks to the richest man in the world who bought the election, then proceeded to destroy every check and balance in place that stopped his companies from doing whatever they wanted. And when the dust settled, I was jobless after 7 years. So when Uncle Jonas died and Mom needed help, I was free. I arrived on a gray, wind-whipped afternoon, typical of early September in Herkimer County. The house was ancient and ugly, surrounded by gnarled oak trees and shrubs that were so overgrown they looked like they were trying to escape the property. The porch nearly collapsed beneath me as I approached the sad mouth pretending it was a door. Childhood memories rushed back to me as I crossed the threshold into the disaster that was once a functional house. Boxes upon boxes of comics and pop culture collectibles were stacked everywhere in what used to be a living room. It was like his entire life exploded across the house, and Uncle Jonas died before he could pick it up. So I got lost in time, rummaging through the mess that had led me to an overwhelming collection of dusty journals dating back to the 1800s. Strange faded photographs, esoteric trinkets, and occult relics were all over the place. Before I knew it, it was after midnight, so I cleared a spot on Jonas's old bed, threw some clean sheets on there, and crashed hard. That first night, I had a crazy dream where Jonas stood at the foot of my bed, his eyes hollow and his skin waxy and gray. His mouth moved, but the words came in whispers, layered on top of each other like a dozen voices speaking at once. "Finish it," he said. His fingers, long and bony, reached towards me, but before he could touch me, I woke up in a cold sweat. I checked my phone, and it was just after 5 in the morning, but the whisper still echoed in my ears hauntingly. "Finish it. Finish this mess. Finish what?" When I stood up and got out of bed, the house creaked like it was breathing and waking up with me. I rummaged through the kitchen, made a pot of coffee, and though it was early and I was still tired, I decided to keep going. I surveyed the collection of weird stuff I had found last night and set it aside in a box. My instincts told me these were important, but how, I couldn't say at the moment. All amped up on coffee, I became a cleaning machine. As I cleared out the junk and started to organize all the unexpected treasures I found, the house started to grow on me. By the end of the day, it looked like a house again. What my grandma used to call the parlor, and I called the living room, felt very spacious once I cleared it out. I admired the Gothic decor on the fireplace and appreciated the care once taken on the trim along the walls to match it. I could imagine the beauty of this house when it was a young lad and felt a sudden urge to return it to its glory days. Maybe I'd keep it after all. And I think the house knew I was feeling it too, because that's when it revealed to me a very intimate secret. As day became night, I had made some serious progress and was ready to actually start organizing things. I wanted to keep my grandmother's old photo albums, so I decided I'd store them in the attic. And when I went up there, I was surprised to see that the attic was actually nice. Way nicer than the real house. Uncle Jonas had remodeled it, and it was cozy and looked lived in. He had a computer up there and a really nice entertainment setup with a huge TV. I poked around the place, and I leaned against a wall to admire the old Atari system and the hundreds of games Uncle Jonas had neatly stored in a cabinet. It bent a little, and then I pushed on it and realized it wasn't a real wall, just a large piece of wood. I pushed it to the side and found that this false wall in the attic led to a room unlike the rest of the house. I called it his study. It was pristine, lined with grand bookshelves and ancient framed parchments. A Barnes & Noble style ladder even ran along the shelves. Jonas had poured time, money, and obsessive care into this place, and my mom never even knew it. It was a man cave of epic proportions that was part nerd and part old world eccentric. A modern wood stove nestled in one corner near a small octagonal window of green stained glass bore a strange circular symbol resembling an eye. I peered out of it, and it stared into the backyard that stretched for miles of rolling hills. And I was feeling watched instead of watching. I wanted to get a good look at his books, so when flipping a switch to turn on the light, I was surprised to hear a mechanical hum rattling above as a large skylight opened to the heavens. The moon was warm and bright. The stars winked, warning or welcoming, I couldn't tell. In the center of the room, among the antique-looking items and statues, lay a battered leather journal its pages brimmed with ancient symbols, newspaper clippings, and frantic notes. I sat down, exploring the peculiar journal with awestruck eyes. It seemed to be a combination of Uncle Jonas's handwriting and that of many others. Like the journal had been passed on from several people before him. The further I read, the more captivating it became, revealing to me a story of a hidden war fought in the shadows for centuries. It appears that crazy Uncle Jonas had been part of some ancient esoteric cult called the Order of the Verdant Root. His writings told of an ancient pact protecting the land and its people from an unspeakable evil. According to this book, modern Christianity wasn't salvation. It was a facade, an unholy gateway through which demonic entities infiltrated our world. Every hymn, every sermon, every act of forced faith leveling right up to Project 2025 and the current state of our nation, divided, angry, and lacking empathy. And because unrest had found such solid ground to stand on in the world today, this had loosened the seal on something buried beneath an old church, something evil. I looked up to see an unopened bottle of scotch catch the light of the moon on its beveled corner. Beckoning to me, I grabbed it and pulled a big swig of it. The burn traveled into my gut while I settled onto the floor with the bottle next to me and started from page 1. I read late into the night, into the morning, drinking until my hands stopped shaking. I fell asleep on the floor, and when I awoke, my head pounded vigorously. The morning light beaming in from the skylight above felt like judgment. I told myself I could prove this was all nonsense, that my uncle had been a delusional, hoarding space cadet who smoked way too much weed and spent too much time alone chasing shadows. But 3 days later, I wasn't so sure anymore. Lack of sleep blurred the edges of reality as all these puzzle pieces started to move in tandem with the details I noticed in the corner of my vision. Whispers bled through the walls, and I felt like there was a sense of ancient purpose I hadn't felt since I would travel into the woods alone as a child, pretending as if I was the reincarnation of some Iroquois warrior from my social studies book. My own reflection seemed delayed, as if watching me from somewhere else. The paranoia wrapped around my ribs like vines, squeezing tighter every hour, every minute. I had become obsessed with this story and how its rotted roots were growing rapidly through every facet of our country, from the smallest towns to the halls of Washington, D.C., and people had known about it for a long, long time. Then I found the photograph that changed everything. It was a yellowed Polaroid dated Herkimer, September 5th, 1971, stuffed into a box Uncle Jonas kept in his desk that had my name on it. It was clear as day now that I was meant to find this. I stood frozen, looking at several hooded figures in a circle around a stone altar, darkly stained with the yellowed but unmistakable splatter of blood. Other images followed behind it of grotesque rituals, sacrificial rites, robed figures bathing in entrails, and even eating flesh. Then I saw them in the background of the main photograph. I had first thought it was just people, but the longer I stared, the clearer the truth became. Their forms were spindly, grotesque, and misshapenly unhuman, or some perversion of it. Jonas hadn't just collected artifacts, he had a library of something terrifyingly real, yet altogether unbelievable. And in the next image, God help me, the ritual played out in gruesome detail. A child was butchered on the altar as the robed figures bathed in its blood. My stomach churned and my heart ached as I saw the bodies of children lifeless in pieces. I dropped the pictures like they had burned my hands. My heart slammed against my ribs and I stared upward at the sky as the realization set in. This was the inside of the church in Herkimer that I had gone to with my grandmother as a child before she died. The church that our family went to. The church that evil festered in was right here, just miles away from this house. It was all real, and Jonas was right. These pictures were authentic and proved it. That night, I drank myself into oblivion. But there are some horrors whiskey can't drown. So I spent the next 3 days unraveling the truth and connection to what got Uncle Jonas wrapped up in all of this. Jonas had been drafted into something older than war itself, indoctrinated by a fellow soldier named Callahan, the last of an Irish bloodline sworn to keep something imprisoned beneath the earth. Callahan wasn't from here, so the irony that Jonas was from here was not lost on me. It was fate that put them together in Vietnam. The church, the real church everyone goes to on Sundays, wasn't what we thought at all what it was. It didn't fight evil, it fed it. Every prayer, every acceptance of the body and blood of Christ, every act of blind faith chipped away at the seals, weakening the boundary that held these beings back. When politics became religion and religion became politics around 2015, everything started to shift. It wasn't hell that they came from. They weren't demons, but something other, unexplainable, that was said to appear on the night of the fullest moon once a year, where it would try to use its influence to breach our world permanently. One day, if the order failed, the church would finally finish what it started. It taught hate and fear in the guise of righteousness, which was apparent in every way, from the highest forms of our government to the lowest forms of social media. Vietnam had stolen Uncle Jonas's innocence, but it had also delivered him into a war far older than any government. He had fought to keep the darkness at bay until his death. That wasn't insanity. That was real, and Uncle Jonas was destined by some otherworldly energy to protect us from whatever lurked from the catacombs of the Christian church in Herkimer. And in 2 days, the full moon would rise to its fullest of the year once more. I had to act. It was obvious now why he left everything to me. He knew I was the only one who could carry on the tradition in our family. He had no kids, and I was the closest thing he had to a relative, which is pretty sad. It would have been nice if he had given me a little heads up or warning before he died, but it seems more often than not that our best laid plans never seem to work out. So using Jonas's notes, I gathered the necessary tools, roots, oils, talismans of protection, and appropriate attire and weapons I would need. I tracked down rare ingredients in hidden shops across New York State, traveling as far as Syracuse and Binghamton. I wasn't going in blind, I was going in as prepared as I could. And like the others before me, I made my own talisman, instructed by the ancient elders from his journal. The act of creation bound me to a duty and to the order. Whether I liked it or not, I had to see this thing through regardless of how insane it all was. Then, on the anointed night, when the moon was at its peak, I made my way to the church. It wasn't until I got out of the car that I truly felt fear crawl up my spine and raise the hair on my neck. The rain came and went in waves as I crouched in the shadows waiting. But as I sat there under a pine tree, my patience was starting to wear thin. A battle raged on in my mind as I waffled in between feeling like a jackass who was fooled by local legends and the dedication to honor my Uncle Jonas who had given his life to this fight. I couldn't let it end with him, but midnight was the cutoff. If nothing happened by then, I was walking away forever. By 11:30, I didn't care anymore. I crossed the threshold and decided to enter the church. I hadn't seen anybody go in or out, so I expected the door to be locked. But it wasn't, and I walked right in. Inside, the silence was absolute, except for the relentless drip of water, echoing off cold stone that I couldn't tell if it was coming from inside or out. The church's ornate interior was a macabre juxtaposition of beauty and decay as I ventured into the oldest church in Herkimer. My flashlight cast grotesque shadows as I followed my uncle's notes through the nave, past the altar, to a hidden spiral staircase. The stone steps bore inscriptions in a language I didn't recognize as Latin that's common in old churches. This writing was older and seemed similar to things I had seen in books at the house. In the darkness of the cellar, the air was rank with mildew, rot, and that coppery tang of blood. As I crept forward, my heart pounded in my ears to the low hum of chanting resonating from deep within the gloom. The further I ventured into the vast subterranean chamber, I could see an eerie, emerald glow. I turned off my flashlight and proceeded in silence. In the center of the room, a jagged altar stood slick with congealed gore. There, in the flickering half-light, I beheld a horror beyond human comprehension. Those figures I saw in the yellowing, blurry photos from 1971 now twisted to life right in front of me. They were hideous, malformed beings, hybrid creatures with human features contorted into monstrous parodies, crawling and writhing about the altar. Their limbs, elongated and sinewy, ended in taloned fingers that scraped against the stone as they chanted in a guttural language that clawed at the edge of my sanity. These were the horrific emissaries the church had nurtured in secret for centuries. Their eyes were pits of burning malice, and every shift of their malformed bodies released a stench of decay that I couldn't ignore. I retreated into the shadows, my fear gnawing at me as I saw the thing I dreaded seeing. A carcass of a dead child in a puddle of blood lay at their feet. The creatures clawed at the child's innards with twisted arms and clawed hands. These were the church's true disciples, and they were preparing for something. I swallowed my fear and reached for my talisman. The roots and oils of the ancients pulsed against my palm. Whispering the incantation, I spat inside it, beginning the ritual. A shriek ripped through the air. One of the creatures lunged, moving with inhuman speed. I barely had time to react before it slammed into me, claws raking my chest. I gasped, pain exploding through my ribs. My fingers clenched around the talisman, whispering the incantation Jonas had left me. My heart pounded, no turning back now. I had only seconds. With every ounce of strength, I hurled it at the altar. A blinding flash erupted as the chamber trembled. The symbols on the walls burned their emerald glow, turning a molten gold. The creatures squealed in piercing agony and furious rage, which made the earth tremble below my feet. One of the creature's claws grabbed my arm and tore my flesh as it gripped onto me. I tripped and yanked my arm free as I landed awkwardly onto the floor. I scrambled to my feet as a force surged beneath the floor. The ancient earth magic, the same power my uncle had devoted his life to, awakened. Thick, twisting roots burst forth from a giant hole made by the talisman, ensnaring the creature and wrenching it apart in a shower of guts and shrieking terror. It ensnared the others and began dragging them into a dark pit in the earth with wooden tentacles. A clawed, leathery hand clasped around my ankle. It pulled hard, yanking me toward the crevice in the floor. My scream echoed through the chamber as I fell onto my back, kicking wildly. More hands surfaced, clawing, grasping at me. I fumbled for the knife in my jacket and slashed blindly. The blade slid through flesh, severing a wrist. The thing recoiled with a loud shriek as its severed hand tumbled into the hole. I kicked it in the face with a wallop that sent it flying backwards as the roots pulled it into the abyss. I pulled myself away from the hole, gasping. I saw the talisman shimmer in the torchlight and crawled toward it. I stuffed it back into my pocket and scrambled to my feet. Their screams echoed off the cold walls as one by one the ghastly beings were pulled into the depths from which they came. And then the church bell tolled 12 jarring rings. I ran as fast as I could and did not look back once. I got in my car and tore off into the rainy night. At that moment in the car, I grasped the talisman. I know the truth now. This was all real. All of it. It had always been real, and it wasn't going to stop. I understood. Uncle Jonas had not died in vain. The Order of the Verdant Root had been formed to keep these horrors at bay, to seal the gateway between our world and the abyss. But the church's unholy covenant had begun to falter, and their demonic allies were growing bolder. Jonas had given his life to this fight. Now it was my turn. The Order of the Verdant Root still had work to do, and I still had to find out way more information because I was just scratching the surface. My roots were now my duty and my curse. But I take solace in my despair, knowing that there are others like me. I've dedicated my life to actively searching for other members of this group so that we may unite against the tyranny of fake prophets, false gods, fake news, and those who worship them with greed, avarice, and perversion in their hearts. And so I ask you, are you one of us, or are you one of them?
Horror.
You're listening to Nerd Horror Stories, a twice-weekly horror anthology series. No commentary, no long intros, just stories. Stories to fall asleep to, stories to keep you awake, and stories that feel close to home. Please subscribe